The island of Guadalcanal may not look like much on a map, just a speck of land in the vast Pacific. But in 1942, it became the stage for one of the most brutal and decisive battles of World War II. For the United States Marine Corps, it was a trial by fire. For the Japanese, it was the moment they realized the Americans were not just another enemy. They were a nightmare that would haunt them for the rest of the war. And at the very center of this hellish battlefield stood one man whose name became legend, John Basilone. A Marine gunnery sergeant with nerves of steel, Basilone's stand on Guadalcanal not only turned the tide of battle but also cemented his place in history as the Marine the Japanese truly feared. Today, I'll take you inside the chaos of Guadalcanal, where mud, blood, and jungle created the harshest test of survival. You'll hear how Basilone, armed with little more than his courage and a machine gun, held off waves of relentless Japanese assaults and gave the Marines a fighting chance. This is not just a story of combat, it's a story of grit, sacrifice, and the making of a legend. So hit that subscribe button, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's dive into the battle that turned Guadalcanal into the Marines' proving ground and John Basilone into the nightmare of Japan. When the Marines landed on Guadalcanal in August 1942, few of them truly understood what awaited them. The Japanese had already proven themselves to be fierce fighters across Asia and the Pacific. They were disciplined, fanatically committed, and unafraid of death. But Guadalcanal was different. It wasn't just another battlefield. It was the first real test of America's ground forces against Japan in a campaign that would decide the balance of power in the Pacific. The Marines quickly found themselves fighting not only the Japanese, but also the unforgiving environment. The jungle was suffocating, full of heat, disease, and insects. Supplies ran low. Malaria spread like wildfire. Food was scarce, ammunition was precious, and the Japanese Navy was constantly threatening the fragile lifeline that connected the Marines to reinforcements. For the men on the ground, it often felt like they were abandoned on a hostile island with no way out. Night was the worst. When the sun dipped below the horizon, the jungle became alive with sound, the buzz of insects, the croaks of frogs, and, more terrifying, the whispers and movements of Japanese soldiers creeping closer. The Japanese specialized in night attacks, using stealth and sudden fury to try to break American lines. Marines often described lying in their foxholes, clutching their rifles, straining their ears, waiting for the inevitable scream of "Banzai" as hundreds of Japanese soldiers charged out of the darkness. And it was in this setting that John Basilone emerged as a leader and fighter who would not only inspire his men, but terrify the enemy. Basilone wasn't born into privilege. He was the son of Italian immigrants, raised in Raritan, New Jersey. Before joining the Marines, he had served in the Army, even doing a stint in the Philippines, where he gained a taste for the Pacific. But it wasn't until he wore the eagle, globe, and anchor that he truly found his calling. He was tough, disciplined, and charismatic. Exactly the kind of man the Marines needed when the situation grew desperate. By October 1942, the battle for Guadalcanal had reached a fever pitch. The Japanese were determined to retake Henderson Field, the critical airstrip that gave the Americans control of the skies. If Henderson fell, the Marines would be pushed back into the sea. To the Japanese high command, retaking that airfield was non-negotiable. To the Marines, holding it meant survival. On the night of October 24th, the Japanese launched one of their fiercest assaults. Thousands of enemy soldiers advanced through the jungle, determined to overwhelm the Marine positions with sheer numbers and ferocity. They struck in waves, screaming "Banzai" as they charged into the American lines. At one section of the perimeter, a handful of Marines found themselves manning 2 heavy machine guns. Among them was Sergeant John Basilone. He quickly realized that if his position fell, the Japanese would pour through and overrun Henderson Field. The odds were staggering. He and his men were outnumbered, outgunned, and cut off from reinforcements. But Basilone didn't retreat. Instead, he dug in. For the next 36 hours, Basilone fought like a man possessed. He moved between machine gun positions, repairing jams, replacing barrels, and keeping the guns firing almost non-stop. When ammunition ran low, he personally ran through enemy fire to resupply his Marines, carrying heavy belts of bullets through the darkness. At one point, when one of the guns went down, he grabbed another weapon and joined the fight directly, mowing down attackers with deadly precision. The Japanese kept coming wave after wave, determined to break through, but every time they advanced, they were cut down by the withering fire. Basilone and his men poured into them. The jungle in front of his position became a killing field, bodies piled up, the air thick with smoke, mud, and blood. Exhaustion clawed at every Marine, but Basilone refused to let it take hold. His leadership and ferocity kept his men from collapsing under pressure. He barked orders, encouraged his Marines, and when necessary, did the work himself. In those brutal hours, he became more than just a sergeant. He became the backbone of the defense. By the time the sun rose on October 25th, the battlefield was littered with hundreds of Japanese dead. Basilone's machine gun positions had held, preventing a breakthrough that could have doomed the entire Marine force on Guadalcanal. His stand bought precious time for reinforcements to arrive and helped secure Henderson Field against one of the most dangerous assaults of the campaign. When the battle was over, the toll was shocking. Basilone's hands were burned from handling overheated gun barrels. He was physically drained, but alive, and his actions had saved countless Marines. For his extraordinary bravery, he was awarded the Medal of Honor, becoming the first enlisted Marine of World War II to receive the nation's highest award for valor. But beyond the medal, something else happened. Word of his defense spread not only among the Marines, but also among the Japanese. His ability to hold off overwhelming numbers with just a handful of men made him a figure of fear. The Japanese, who had once dismissed the Americans as weak and inexperienced, now understood that the Marines were an enemy, unlike any they had faced before. And Basilone, in particular, became a symbol of that nightmare. The Battle of Guadalcanal itself dragged on for months, with brutal fighting on land, at sea, and in the air. The Japanese Navy launched desperate attempts to retake control, leading to some of the bloodiest naval battles in history. Supplies remained scarce, and the Marines had to fight hunger and disease as much as enemy bullets, yet the tide had turned. The Japanese could not break through, and the Americans slowly pushed them back, until by February 1943, the island was declared secure. Basilone's stand was not the only act of heroism on Guadalcanal, but it became one of the most iconic. It represented the grit and determination that would define the Marine Corps throughout the Pacific War. Guadalcanal was the turning point, the moment the Japanese advance was halted and the long, bloody road to victory for the Allies began. For Basilone, his heroism didn't end on Guadalcanal. After receiving his Medal of Honor, he was sent back to the United States, where he became a celebrity, raising war bonds and inspiring Americans on the home front. But he wasn't content to stay behind. Despite his fame and the offers to remain safe, Basilone requested to return to the fight. And in 1945, on the black sands of Iwo Jima, he once again proved his courage. Leading his Marines through the hell of that invasion, Basilone was killed in action, giving his life in service to his country. For his actions there, he was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross, making him one of the few Marines to receive both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross in World War II. Basilone's story is more than just the tale of one man. It's the story of Guadalcanal itself, the battle that transformed the Marines into a force the Japanese could no longer underestimate. It was where the myth of invincibility surrounding the Japanese army was broken, and where the legend of the Marine Corps as America's fiercest fighting force was born. The Battle of Guadalcanal was not just another clash in the Pacific. It was the moment the United States proved it could stand toe-to-toe with the Empire of Japan and win. Out of the mud, the hunger, the sleepless nights, and the waves of relentless attacks, the Marines forged a reputation that would follow them for the rest of the war. They were no longer the untested rookies of 1942. They were hardened warriors, and the Japanese knew it. At the heart of that transformation stood John Basilone. His stand at Henderson Field was more than just an act of courage. It was a signal to friend and foe alike that the Marines would never break, no matter the odds. For the men who fought beside him, Basilone was more than a sergeant. He was a shield, a leader, and a reminder that even in the darkest moments, one person's resolve can hold back the tide. Guadalcanal marked the turning point of the Pacific War. From that island onward, the Japanese would be on the defensive, slowly losing ground as the Allies pushed forward. But for the Marines, Guadalcanal would always be sacred ground, the place where they first stood tall and refused to be defeated. And John Basilone, he became the embodiment of that spirit, a Marine who fought, bled, and ultimately gave his life not for glory, but for his brothers, his country, and the belief that freedom was worth any price.